Hi everyone, my name is Amber Case, and I'm going to be talking to you about calm technology today, embracing Periphery in design. As an introduction, we live in an era of interruptive technology. What does that mean? That means that we're trying to do something and our phone runs out of batteries, or there's an internet connection issue, or there's an alert that happens in the background and brings it into the foreground. We are constantly being interrupted by different notifications. In fact, if we were to think of a technology as roommates, they're pretty disruptive. And so we need the opposite. We need a kind of calm technology. What is a calm technology? How does it engage with our attention or not? What's the history of calm technology? In 1996, Mark Weiser and John Seely Brown wrote a little paper called The Coming Age of Calm Technology, and in it, they proposed that the important waves of technological change are those that fundamentally alter the place of technology in our lives. But what matters is not technology itself, but its relationship to us, and how that technology makes or breaks our attention will make or break that technology. One of the things that they wrote was that the scarce resource would no longer be technology. Technology would start to become very affordable, but attention would be very, very expensive. So in its simplest form, calm tech is the idea that tech should function as a pass-through for everyday experiences and tasks, allowing us to focus on humanness, not machines. A lot of times when we see technology advertised, it's advertised as the tech. It's, oh, what camera did you use to take that photo? Not, what was your relationship to the camera over the past 5 years that allowed you to see that and allow that photo to be taken through the camera? You passing through the camera, your eyes extending to the lens, and being able to use that tool alongside you to take that photo. It's a very different perspective. And applied to product design, calm tech is the minimum amount of technology required to solve a problem. This is very important because I have a lot of clients that ask me questions like, how do I make a smart fridge that tells whether there's sweets in the fridge that you shouldn't eat, or gives us information? And usually they try to put a special webcam in the fridge to record calories, and there's all sorts of information there. But a banana peel is an ideal calm technology because it just changes color when it's ripe and overripe, and from the outside you can see what's going on inside of it. It's a very straightforward approach. You can see from far away whether that banana is ripe or not, and whether it's time to put it in the freezer or make banana bread with it. Let's talk a little bit about the expectations of time. We were told a lot, especially in the past, that technology was there to give us more time and not less. But I'd like to talk about two notions of time from the Greeks. One is chronos time, and the other is kairos time. Chronos time is the kind of time that you have when you go to the office. Maybe you have a meeting from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. There's an agenda on that meeting. And at the end of your life, you're probably not going to remember this meeting, but it's necessary to just get the job done. It's also very important factory time if you want to get something done. But there's another special kind of time that people remember more, and this is kairos time. This is the lived experience of time. It's the idea of watching a sunset or watching a baby's first steps. It's this fundamentally human time. It's really, really important to think about this time. And why is that? Because this is the time that we were promised that our technology would give us. And instead, technology is interrupting our kairos time by having us take a photo that we'll never look at again, probably, of that sunset, instead of just sitting there and being there in the moment. Another really important concept is the idea of nature. This is one of the people that maintains the Portland Japanese gardens. And they say it's funny how you have to work so hard to make something look natural. People will walk through this garden and they won't see the work that I do. They won't see it, but they'll experience it. They'll experience that experience. They will pass through that, and they're not noticing the tech. They're not noticing the garden shears. They're just focusing on the experience. And that's what it's all about. But to craft that, to think about that, is really, really important. So let's talk a little bit about pass-through technologies. When you drive a car, is it invisible? How about a book when you read it? A car becomes a part of us and really extends our perception. Eventually, when we get used to a car, which might take a really long time to learn how to drive, we're getting that information using not just our attention in front of us, our primary attention, but our peripheral attention, and we're using that to make decisions on the road. But it's extending our perception, and how a car is designed allows you specific affordances that either work with or against your attention, just like having a big blue rectangle of a touchscreen in the car that divides your attention from the road to itself and changes the button all of the time. It's very different than not having to look to turn up and down the radio dial or to turn your turn signal on. The way that both of those systems have been designed is a form of governance that allows you to either make better decisions and inform, or take your attention off the road and try to deal with what's happening in front of you. And it's not that these technologies are easy to use. They take a really, really long time to learn. It takes a long time to learn how to drive. It can take many years to learn how to write. And these devices, these tools are actually super complex. But once this complexity dissolves, we have this feeling of pass-through when we use them, and they become familiar. There are a lot of people that try to make something that's easy to use up front, but it's very difficult to have a relationship with something that's so easy to use immediately. Some of these technologies take some time, but once they're learned, everything is there right where you need it, in your peripheral attention. So pass-through equals use plus time. So how do you see the unseen? There are so many pass-through technologies that we're used to using every day that we don't notice anymore because they don't make themselves known all the time. A really good example is a light switch. It sits there in the room, and we use it when we decide we want to turn on and off the light, but otherwise we don't notice it. And the way in which it's been designed is, even if you're in a dark room and you don't know where the light switch is, you can probably tap on the wall to try to figure out where the light switch is. There's a lot of complexity behind the scenes that you need to be an electrical engineer to be able to make, or at least a licensed electrician to be able to edit, but all of that complexity is behind the wall, even though it's quite dangerous, and yet we get this affordance in our peripheral attention that we can choose to turn on and off. The chair, if you're sitting in a chair right now, is a calm technology. If it's poorly designed, you focus on the chair and not what you're doing in the chair. But if it's well designed, it's as if you're just floating there. You're not really actively noticing it. Just like a good pair of running shoes. There's just as much technology in a good pair of running shoes as there is possibly in many electronics. But when they're built well and they work with us, we can use them alongside us, and they become pass-through objects where we just run and we don't notice them, and they help us. This room has calm technology all over it, but one of the, I'd like to see if you can guess this first, but one of the most important inventions was the glass pane. This series of windows in here allows someone to see the outside without having to go outside. It's bringing the outside in. It's making the invisible visible. And there's an extra row on the top called a transom window that lets even more light in. You can see the weather outside without having to go outside. You can see the time of day. This kind of pass-through transparency is a very advanced and very exciting form of technology. So let's look at some principles of calm technology. We've covered a bit of the idea of peripheral attention, just a little bit. we've covered some pass-through technologies, but let's go a little bit deeper. John Seeley Brown and Mark Weiser initially introduced the beginnings of what could be some principles of calm technology. And some time ago, I got really excited about reading that paper from the 90s and wanted to introduce more principles of calm technology. So the first principle is that technology shouldn't require all of our attention, just some of it, and only when necessary. What does that mean? Well, with a light switch, it's not calling to you when you're not using it. It's not trying to get you to download a software update. It's just there when you need it, not when you don't. And when you're not using it, it sits there on the wall. And it can be color-coded to look like the wall so you don't notice it so much when you're across the room. But even then, you can glance, see where the light switch is, and turn it on and off. This foot pole on the right side is really interesting because a lot of earlier technologies, mechanical technologies, like the sewing machine, would use a foot pedal to control it so that you didn't have to, you had an extra limb, basically. The same with a car. You can use a foot pedal, but you don't have to look at the foot pedal to be able to use it. So not every piece of information or feature is worthy of immediately capturing someone's attention, but it should be there when needed. Technology should inform and create calm. What does that mean? How do you give information in a calm way? Just thinking about the banana again, it's giving you information, but it's not overbearing. Here are some examples from Japan that I really like. I do a lot of work in Japan, and there's so many calm technologies there that have been around for a very long time. This stone in the middle of the image here is a stopping stone. When you're at a Japanese garden, instead of having a really bright red sign that says, "Keep out, do not enter," there's just a stone with a rope. And this stone, at the edge of a path, tells you subtly, and you can tell a 3-year-old this if you want, without having to have them be able to read a specific language, don't go further. This is a private part of the garden. That's it. It's not really yelling at you. It's just a little bit more noticeable than the rest of nature. And that's what I really like about it. It's nuanced, but it does the job. And you're not reading a sign that says, "Caution, keep out." It's not a barbed wire fence, because it's not necessary here. It's just a stone. I really like on the right side just mirrors that are a bit hyperbolic shaped so that you can see around a corner. This is taking something invisible, which is a view around a corner, and making it visible. It's taking information from one place and taking it into another place. On the left side, there are symbols for whether trains are arriving on time. This is the speed rail train in Japan. And then also this hallway has all these color-coded icon-based navigation. So even if you don't know the language, you can go around and understand which trains are available at which hallways based on color coding. You don't need a heads-up display. You don't need augmented reality glasses. And this can be used all over the place. You might see it in hospitals. I think most notably, if you know the color of your train line, you can make it out across the train station and understand where it goes. And I think that's really important, that you don't have to be all the way in a tiny sign, standing in front of it, reading a paragraph of text to understand that's where your train is. It's this low resolution information in your peripheral attention, which has lots of information space, just lower resolution information space, and higher resolution as you get closer. So an example, an eyeglass, you focus on the view, not the glasses. It can be decorative as well, but it's a pass-through interface that allows people to focus through that lens instead of on the lens. And it can be both functional and decorative. And these little glass office windows allow people to see whether there's someone in the room, but still give them privacy. Technology should empower our peripheral attention. And again, the peripheral attention can be just a glance at something. It can be low resolution. This is a thing called a heat sink. A heat sink is just an LED attached to a faucet that changes color based on what the temperature is. Again, it's making something that's invisible, like temperature, and turning it into a sense that you can see. I really like this because one of my friends calls it infosynesthesia. Synesthesia means that you might experience one sense in another sense, but this is about being able to take information and change it from one invisible sense, like needing to touch it to see what the temperature is, to a sense that you can glance at. And I think that's a really interesting way to take something that's invisible, make it visible, and put it into peripheral attention. There's another term for this also called ambient awareness. What are you aware of ambiently in the place that you're in right now? Whether it's outside, or in an office, or in a room, or you're eating lunch at a crowded place. There's so much information in the environment that is in your peripheral attention. If you stop for a moment and question, what's the furthest sound that you can hear right now? And then, what's the closest sound you can hear right now? How does where you're standing or sitting affecting you? What are the textures on the chair? What's directly in your view? Is it harmonious? Is it lots of different colors? Or is there a lot of text around, a lot of ads, a lot of clutter? All of these things are joining together in our sensory systems and providing us with an experience. And we're ambiently aware of so many different things, whether that's a loud fan in a room or an air conditioning unit that's really noisy, in a museum when we're trying to look at some art. There's all sorts of different ways that technology and experience can be a little bit out of tune, and we can tune it back in with a Calm technology. Here's another example of infosynesthesia. This is a Hue light bulb, an internet-connected light bulb, connected to a weather report. So this was in Portland, Oregon. You could walk into the kitchen and feel what the temperature was going to be in the future, meaning this was a nice yellow color, so you could tell if it was going to be sunny out. It might be blue. Again, it's in Portland, Oregon, so it might be blue, it's raining. It might just be white because it's overcast, or it might be very, very red because it's going to be extremely hot out. But instead of having a disembodied robot voice wake you up and tell you the weather report and have you parse it right in the morning, you walk into the kitchen, you can feel what the weather is going to be by simply experiencing the light in your peripheral attention. And if you want more information, you can go to the iPad on the wall that gets you that granularity, but then you have to pay your primary attention to it. So this is all about taking it into secondary and tertiary attention, where there's less resolution, less ability to have lots and lots of little detail, but you can still get so much detail, you can compress so much detail there without overburdening. Here are some examples of peripheral attention. One is in Japan, there's a tactile paving station that let passengers know they're too close to the edge of the train. If you tap it with your cane, you don't go over that line. But it's also really helpful if you don't notice and look down when you're really busy. Don't go over that bumpy surface or you'll get run into by a train. That tactility, that dimensionality is informing without overburdening. Even though it's pretty yellow, it's quite a bit of an emergency notification system, but it allows you to feel it with your feet as well, so you don't need to look at it when you're walking over it. The ill-fated Jawbone Up was a really interesting bracelet you could wear that would monitor sleep and other information, but it had such a simple interface. It just had a single button and a colorful status light and a buzzer. So there's no real special screen. It just had that much information, and with that it can communicate and inform you of so many things. It was really, really well designed on that aspect. If you are in a group of people that has been on land for a long time, I've been all over the United States with different tribes, and learning about what everybody names things and how much information is in just a little bit of the land. All of this is super high resolution. Communicating to people is designed in a way that you could wake up in the morning and walk around and see all the status updates that nature has done. I really feel like we can learn a lot from how any landscape communicates through nature. And if you zoom in, as in walk really close to something like a kid, you'll see so much more information. So I think it's really important to really understand where this comes from and be respectful of it, because there's so much that can be done. I also think that, if you if you have a dog, you have to take it out every day and it's smelling all of the new smells, because there are other dogs that have peed and the dogs want to know what's up, because it's basically an analog social network. What's going on? What's new? What's new? What's new? What's this smell? What does that mean? But humans want to do the same thing, and that gets us really stuck into phones, because the phones provide that same idea that there is something new going on in the environment, in the world, and people will just click on it for a long time, because we have that need to basically take a walk in nature every day, or be there and understand what's happening, seeing what the changes are, understanding the landscape. And so instead of going outside, a lot of people get stuck in bed, or they're not living in a neighborhood where it's okay to go outside, or there's some sort of environmental event that's happening that makes it really dangerous to go outside, or there's no places to walk because it's a bunch of condos, or it's a bunch of new developments, or the sidewalks aren't built up. There's so many reasons why people can't see this, but I think it's really something that the human mind wants. And when we get it through social media posts instead, it's not fulfilling that right and left eye movement that we do when we go into the woods or any natural landscape. So what can we learn from that? Technology can communicate, but it doesn't need to speak. So one of the problems is that in a lot of science fiction films, we were taught that computers make noises, and is not how it necessarily should be, because in a movie, we're expected to sit there and be entertained by all the movement on the screen. We're expected our attention to be held. But when we go home, we don't necessarily want our washer and dryer to speak in a disembodied female voice at us, telling us when the laundry is done, especially if it's 3 a.m. and we just want to set the thing, forget it, and turn off the signal. So there's different ways to communicate without having to speak. In the middle, there is this color fill filter, which I really like. Red and pink particles are definitely can, they don't really like to last very long on materials. If you look at some sun-drenched Arizonan landscape, you might see a lot of old signs, and only the blue colors on those signs are left, because red is one of the first to fade. So by coating the filter, the house filter, in kind of pink-red particles, those will fall off over time and reduce it to this kind of yellow color. And all you have to do is open up, glance at your air filter, and see that there aren't any pink particles anymore. And then you know it's time to change the filter. There's no setting a Google Calendar with an event about changing the filter. Just glance, no, and replace. It's very much based on the banana peel. The Roomba robotic vacuum cleaner originally had just a simple tone when it was done. It would go dun dun dun, and when it got stuck, it would go dun dun. And if it got stuck, you needed to go help it. And through helping it out, people started to really bond to it. It wasn't that it did everything or was perfect, but it was in those moments of imperfection in which it needed help. That's where humans really bond to things. And so it became very endearing to people, and cats like to ride around on it in YouTube videos. Now there are some more human disembodied voices in the robot vacuum cleaner, which means not only does there need to be more memory on board to store all of that voice, but it sounds really weird to have basically a filter-feeding trilobite machine speaking with a human voice, and then having to translate that into a bunch of different languages. The great thing about that da-da-da-da is that everybody understands, even if somebody doesn't understand language yet, or a specific language, that the thing is done, and then there's a backup notification, which is just a color that says, this is okay. This is another really good piece of technology. So this was built with Calm Tech principles. This is called the AirThings. This is the AirThings Plus View. It has a lot of sensors in it. It takes something that's invisible and could kill people, like radon, which is, I think, the #1 cause of lung cancer outside of smokers. It's an invisible radioactive gas that can be in people's basements. And it allows you to see what that radon is. And if it's above a certain amount, you can get the radon abatement system installed, and it handles it. But what's really important is that people don't often know why, what's going on in their house. in the same way you might have a bunch of people in a conference room and they all start to get really tired. Chances are that the CO2 in the air is like at 1500. It's really, really high. The outdoor world is somewhere between like 550 and 700. And so when you open the window and get some fresh air, or you walk around, you get back to kind of self-regulation. But that tiredness sometimes is a sign. But if you just have the sensor in the room, you can say, oh my gosh, it's time to take a break. Or, oh, I am feeling tired. And sometimes these things are just ignored. People having trouble sleeping at night. There's also volatile organic compounds and a couple other things that this senses. But the display is nice because there's a little LED that's diffused in the middle, and it just changes color when you wave your hand over it. You get an ink display, and you get a very small indicator of the overall quality of the air. So this one is green, it's okay. It could be yellow, and then you could look at the app, but you get to choose when to look at the app. It's not telling you all that information, it's giving you an indicator of a change. And in this way, humans can really be alongside technology. I can have this little thing as a buddy in my room, or in a classroom, or anywhere I am, to kind of understand, how is this invisible information actually affecting people? But I think a lot of times we forget that tools, and the whole history of tools, were that we worked alongside tools. We worked alongside a hammer as an extension of a fist, or a knife as an extension of our teeth. It's humans alongside technology. And that's very, very special to remember, because a lot of the tech that we're doing isn't really alongside. It's just not a very good roommate either. It's not even a good companion species. In Japanese tea ceremony, there's an idea of omotenashi, which is the idea of the host, loosely translated, knowing what the guests will need before they need it and preparing it for them very quietly, so you don't notice until you need it. The problem is that I think a lot of people, when they're making tech, they think, let's make a robot that understands human needs and gives them the information when they need it. Now, most of the time, if that's done right, it's terrifying. Like Amazon knowing exactly what you're going to buy next, eek! Or it's done really, really poorly, and it's just super annoying. In Japan, what is really meant by this is something like this. Someone new to Japan is coming to buy a ticket on a train station, and they're not familiar with this machine, and they're getting a little stuck. A person comes right out of the machine and presses the buttons for him and gets him through the station. Now, of course, there's a need to keep these trains very speedy. It's a collective culture after all. But the idea that when someone is stuck, that a real human comes out who knows the machine better and can help them on their way is very special. Very often when you're stuck on hold on a call, the number one thing that you want is somebody to be there for you and to talk to a real human. People often press the 0 operator button to get to them. So having delightful, graceful, meaningful, and helpful, empathetic failure modes in any sort of technology, because it does fail, is very, very, very important, and can be done with delightful ways. Technology should amplify the best of what technology can do and the best of what humanity can do. A lot of times, people try to make machines that act like humans, and then we expect to be able to interact with humans, or with machines in the same way that we interact with humans. And it's kind of the opposite. Oftentimes, when there is a machine that tries to act like a human, we end up acting like a machine, repeating ourselves in order to interact with the piece of technology. These can be amplified. The best can be amplified of each. Also, just looking at like a search engine. When someone does a search in Google, they're not getting the first result always and clicking on that. They're able to choose. And a bunch of bots behind the scenes are actually going through the search engine results and ranking them. But it's a person that chooses at the end, because people are pretty good curators. So it's amplifying what humans are good at doing, which is choosing and curating, and what machines are good at doing, which is going through millions of records in several seconds to be able to get and display that information so that somebody can move on with their life. It's very much a pass-through interface. This is a machine on the right, which is a wearable exoskeleton for workers in Japan. It's by Panasonic. It's a very friendly machine because it's just a robot backpack that helps you not get injured when you're lifting heavy loads. That's it. It doesn't look like Terminator or RoboCop. It has harmonious green and purple colors. Someone else can see the battery status when you're walking around, and then when it gets low, they can help you out of it and help you charge the battery and swap you into a new one, or swap the battery out. It's very straightforward. It's not super exciting, but it helps people feel safer at work, especially if they're coming back to work with injuries. So here's a little bit of a larger picture of it. This person had a slipped disc and wanted to go back to work, so he has this little suit that helps him out. It's just a little bit of a gradient softening for life. It's not trying to make him to a superhuman, but it's trying to ease the load and the worry about him doing something that he can't return from. A very, very, very important thing in engineering school is the idea of redundancy, the idea of safety. If you're making a bridge, you're not making a bridge for a single demographic. You're making it for everybody, including very large trucks, and maybe you have to open the bridge for boats to come through. But you're trying to design the bridge in which there's a huge temperature range change, there's huge storms, and for as many scenarios as possible, it's going to be okay. And if it's not, then you put a weight limit on the bridge and you say, here's the weight limit, or here's the conditions in which we need to shut the bridge down. And you tell the government and they shut the bridge down. But for a lot of people making startups, this is not something that people did. They didn't go to engineering school. They didn't get engineering ethics. They didn't get basic redundancy. Where it works, it fails. Or when it stops working, it fails. So when an escalator breaks, it turns into stairs. You can still use the escalator. There's a startup on the right called petnet.io. This was an automated feeding startup. The problem is that the feeding schedule was not based in the house. It was based on a remote server, a remote feeding schedule managed by some machine in the cloud far away. And when that server went down, there were a bunch of pets that starved, and their owners were not able to get to them. I mean, eventually people would break into a house when someone's out of town, or make sure the pet was okay. And I don't think any animals died, but the whole point was that people wanted to trust that the technology made things easier for them than before. But PetNet didn't understand that the first thing that needs to be put into a system that supports life is to work even when it fails. What happens when the kibble gets stuck in the dispensing chute? What happens when the electricity goes out? How many hours can the dispenser still dispense? These are all really, really important questions. The right amount of tech is the minimum needed to solve the problem, which is very difficult. Often people say, we're doing something revolutionary. And they make a new media player and they don't put a play button that looks like a play button, and then nobody can use it. So analog and digital for music technology is pretty good. You can still have a play button on a piece of software and a play button on a physical tape deck. But sometimes people make really weird light switches. This Philips Hue light switch on the right is interesting, but it lacks the tactility, the physical dimensionality of a light switch. And so people can get confused when they're at a house. Which side am I turning the lights on and off? Which lights are they? What are they doing? And if it's a voice-controlled lights, sometimes if you're a guest at a house, like a rental property, you need a little laminated set of commands that say, this is what the bedroom is called. This is what the bathroom is called. It doesn't necessarily always work with analog light switches. So this is always an issue of like this, here's an extra amount of complexity that people who are familiar with this system can have a good time, but people shouldn't have to be a system administrator to live in their own home, and should certainly not have a terrible time when they go on vacation trying to figure out where a new light switch is, what this thing is. Everything is in a different place, and if you're trying to use a speaker system, having to download an old app that's no longer supported by the device to be able to just plug in and play music. I see this happen all the time, and anybody who travels is very, very well aware of it. These are some really good examples of technology where there's some kind of iconography. This might be out of date a little bit on the left, but there's some iconography that says, this is a bathroom and it's occupied. Glanceable from the back of the plane, glanceable even if you aren't wearing contact lenses or glasses and you're taking a nap and you glance up, and glanceable even if you're red-green colorblind. You don't have to parse a human readable written language to understand the status. You just know. It's ambient awareness. And with streetlights, there's no Bluetooth timer telling you how many seconds you have left. You can just glance at the other stack of lights across from you on the other side of the street and see, is that light going to turn yellow? These indicators are very low resolution, very complex behind the scenes with civil engineers, but they give us the punctuation that we need to go places and not run into each other. It's that simple or simple to experience stuff that's very complex behind the scenes, that's very calm tech, very pass-through. So leveraging familiar behaviors to introduce new ones is really important. Having something that people are already used to and introducing that into the product means that people who go into a new rental car don't have to hunt around for all the different buttons that are not uniform. There's still a steering wheel. There's still a foot pedal. There's still a stick shift to go into park and reverse. Thankfully, those things don't change too much. But if those start to change, people will have a 5-minute period of time in the car where they're asking an AI about the car model and where all the things are so that they can actually get on the road. And that amount of loss of attention and time, the amount of fights that will happen in the car because people are stressed out or tired or jet lagged and they just want to get out of that rental car parking lot, is huge. So these calm tech principles are the first attempt at making guidelines that, if people start following these, and a bunch of different companies and products and services and universities and books and many things have started to follow these, that even if just a little bit of them are adopted, things will become increasingly better over time. Because design is governance. How we design something, especially a technology, affects the people that use that technology. Harlan Ellison had this little short story, and in it he said, "I have no mouth, but I must scream." Anytime a piece of technology is designed in a way that doesn't allow certain activities to be done, whether that's some sort of date picker that makes you manually go back month by month to your birth date on a website, for instance, and you aren't able to tell anybody that that's a bad idea and it's taking all of your time and you're trying to fill out a government form. There's so many little times in which there's no one to talk to, there's no one to tell, and there's no one there because the software is built and people must scream. And again, in science fiction, we're expected to be excited, but in reality, we just want pass-through interfaces. And the future, or at least our idea of the future from the 50s, from the 40s, is super outdated at this point. Which is a hard thing to swallow because, we still want Zeppelins and flying cars and all sorts of things. And we do have all of the stuff. We have a lot of the stuff now. But it's not exactly super futuristic, and it's not exactly super old school. It's more about having the past alongside the present in harmony. Here's a new air filtration system. Well, it should match what the home looks like, or at least stay out of the way and be quiet and not add additional noise and clean the air. And it should have a light that turns on when the filter needs to be changed, but not a beeping sound. There's so many different ways for something to inform and calm. So if the future is outdated, I think we're not really in the future. I think we're in Victorian era 2.0. Let me explain. In the Victorian times, there were so many different new products in people's houses. And there were even new green products and dresses and things made with arsenic that killed people. And there was a new standards body called the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval that came out that said, hey, let's start to regulate what's in your house. Let's start to recommend good stuff. And it helped people understand a little bit more. But I think the same thing is happening to our time right now. We have technology that's poisoning our time, and it's invisibly doing so. And we need to be able to fight back a little bit. So how can we design a future of better human experiences? A lot of people need to make money quarterly because they're at publicly traded companies. Their clients, their customers, and everyone is stuck in a financial model that forces people to make short-term decisions, short-term technologies, and short-term tech. So we can advocate for this within an organization. I think as designers, as developers, we all want better stuff. But we have to realize there's a theory called donut economics in which you care about all of the variables and externalities that go into a system, not just did it sell for a margin, but customer satisfaction and how we experience the world is a accumulation of many qualitative factors, not just quantitative. I show this image of a screen in a hotel room where you go into a hotel room and you just want to turn off the TV or you want to turn it on. And it used to be that you would go back around the TV and there would just be a button, a physical button with a raised dot, and you would know that that was the way to turn off the television. The big problem is that a lot of these televisions are removing these dots. They're removing buttons. So you don't know how to do it. You have to take your phone, go underneath the television, swivel the television out on its swivel, light up the bottom of the television and figure out how to turn it off or on, or find the remote and figure out that remote. So how do you turn off this TV if you can't find the remote and there's no raised dot on the power button? I'll leave that as an exercise to the viewers here. But it takes time. And that time could be better experienced doing something else, like being on the vacation or the work trip or wherever brought you to this hotel. Here's an example of a good raised dot on a button. The big start copy button on a printer. And the stop button has just a little bit of a braille-like code that allows you, while having a conversation with somebody else in the office possibly, to start and stop. They're different shapes, they're clearly indicated, there are icons on them, and you just learn them over time. They become part of muscle memory. This is peripheral attention. And if we can put these in more things, good things will happen. But that's just one example. So calm design over time increases the likelihood of serious brand loyalty, understanding, having soft edges, being able to make something that works well alongside people. And even a human-centered redesign of a popular smoke detector saw this huge increase in market share because they just realized that people were embarrassed about having a smoke detector that went off a lot, and they needed to make a big button on it so you could turn it off with the end of a broomstick. And once they did that, I think the market share for the smoke detector was like the kiddie smoke detector. It went up to like 70 or 80%. And it revolutionized how people designed smoke detectors because it was about understanding how somebody could get out of an embarrassing situation. Nothing to do with the tech itself. So products have a huge opportunity to differentiate their brand with experiences that work with attention instead of against it. So good design allows people to accomplish their goals with the least amount of moves. Then calm tech allows people to accomplish the same goals, but with the least amount of mental cost. Because unless we choose it, a person's primary task should not be computing. It should be being human. Hopefully smarter people, not devices. When we have more information, we can make a better decision, as long as it's not overburdening. And I guess the last thing about calm tech is you would think that taking information out would make people more calm, but it's actually putting more information in the environment that allows people to be more calm because they can make better decisions. It's just how the information is displayed, how it's made, that allows people to do that. If you want to learn more, there are some further resources. The original Calm Tech website has a lot of papers. I've been archiving all the early papers. Mark Weiser died when he was 46. He's not around anymore. There are a couple of talks that you can see, including this one. There are 2 books on this topic. There are 2 O'Reilly books. One is on Calm Tech and the history, and it goes over the principles in great detail. And another one is just about sound design. How do you design sound that's not super invasive, but also informative? There's a new thing called the Calm Tech Institute, where we're trying to work on this a little bit more, bringing this to companies and trying to expand the principles. And there is also a new program where we are making it economically reasonable to implement this at companies so that there's an economic measurement that's associated with something positive so that a company can say, hey, we can just get certified. Now we have a reason to do this. Kind of like non-GMO and any of these other things that people look at when they buy groceries, but that for attention. This is how we rank the attention of products and how they engage your primary attention, your peripheral attention, how they work when they fail, light, and if it's annoying or not, or it's invasive, sound and materials. So thank you so much. And I'm not sure how long this session is, but I think we'll have a bit of time for questions. Future self will be in this session. I hopefully will have chatted with some of you already. So yeah, I'll switch over now to the live mode if that works. Thank you so much.